Howdy. This is Mission Texas,
a political podcast about winning Texas by 2032, or else we may lose the White House for a generation.
I'm one of your hosts, Alex Clark.
And I am Kate Rumsey.
Other podcasts may focus on the day-to-day or the next election, but we are keeping the eyes of Texas on the bigger prize. What happens after the next census?
Hello, and welcome back to Mission Texas. Today, we are joined by State Senator Nathan Johnson. Senator Johnson represents Dallas in the Texas Senate. And in 2023, when I was the race director for the Freedom Run, hosted by the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers, we both won our age groups. I won't tell you who came before the other between the two of us, but I'll just say this, Senator, we can have a rematch anytime you want.
Can I tell them who came in first?
Well, you can. I feel like I've done a bad job with the introduction because I buried the lead. Senator Johnson is one of two declared candidates for Texas Attorney General. Yes.
I suppose more importantly, but I appreciate everybody's activity in the community. And it was a fun race, and I'm a few age groups past you.
That's right.
Which makes it easier to win.
Y'all would beat me, I'm sure. But we got to do another race. We're all runners here.
Speaking of races.
Yeah, let's get into your race.
When's the Attorney General's race and all the races across the state?
Yeah. So you're running again, Senator, but now for a different office. I think we all heard rumblings that you wanted to run for a statewide, and you are now in for the AG's race. Tell us how you got into that race.
I mean, I've been looking at the possibility of a statewide race for quite some time now. I don't think I was ready in prior cycles. I think I've been able to get more experience in the legislature and through electoral politics generally. So just being ready yourself, I think, is important about any decision to run, especially if you're talking about running in a state of 30 million people. It's a big undertaking. As I looked around at different races, what's the best avenue for me? Where can I be the most useful candidate to the state and to the ticket overall? And when I look at the Attorney General's office, I see an office that has a level of power that is generally not appreciated, that requires a level of objectivity that I think kind of by nature I have, and one that has been in the past quite a few years, grossly abused and neglected. And neglected, I mean the power of that office to do good. I heard someone describe it as a white hat agency, has been anything but. And so when I look at, who are the opponents? What does the race look like? What can I do when I get to that office? This one seems like the right one for me at this time.
Yeah, and for those of the listeners who aren't just fully steeped in this and are not big Politico nerds like me and Kate, just some background. Senator Johnson flipped this district here in Dallas. Was it back in 2018?
2018, yeah.
2018, and that's no small undertaking. And given the nature of this show, we're especially interested in talking to candidates who flip districts, who don't just run in the safe space, who aren't just talking to their own primary voters. By nature of your win, you had to do something different. And I want to get into that, but I also want to make sure that the listeners are understanding that when we talk about the Attorney General's office and the way it has lacked integrity for the last several years, we're talking about Ken Paxton, the name you may have heard of, in all likelihood going to be the Republicans' nominee for U.S. Senate in this coming election. He's very likely to take down John Cornyn, who, if you can believe it, is somehow not MAGA, not conservative enough for today's Republican Party. So I just wanted to put that in there.
And the difficulty of flipping a seat and what it's all about, I guess it's relevant to your earlier question of why the Attorney General's race. What was happening in 2018 was a confluence of factors. Democrats were, of course, extremely angry about things that were happening. They were angry about the Trump election. They were angry about the Republican majority's failure to invest in public education. And anger drives turnout to a point, but there were two other factors at work. One of them was that these angry Democrats actually smelled blood in the water. And I guess we shouldn't use gruesome metaphors. So the Democrats, I guess there's a much more positive way to put that. They had legitimate hope that we could win. And they had hope that they could elect their local district court judge, their state representative, their state senator, their U.S. representative, and their U.S. senator. It was this tremendous opportunity to have your vote actually matter. And I think that hope factor drove turnout as much as anything else. And then there was one other thing. Texas always has a sizable contingent of people that call them independents, call them moderates, call them whatever. They tend to wait very late in the election cycle to decide who to vote for. And so when we get down to the election time, they're called undecideds. And we had around 12, 13 points that were still undecided going into early voting in 2018. And in our post-election analysis and our real-time calls and sampling during early voting, we estimate 70 to 80% of the undecideds voted for Democrats that cycle. In similar analyses in the next three elections, 70% of those undecideds voted Republican. That's a big deal in these Texas elections. So if in this year, as in 2018, you have this surge of Democratic anger and hope and determination and enthusiasm leading to a rise in turnout, at the same time as you have that kind of independent, narrow slice in the middle breaking for Democrats, I think you could see statewide wins. I think you see a number of local wins. Add another factor. There are people who have called themselves Republicans their whole lives because they're fiscally conservative and they are for limited government and those kinds of principles. And I'm not sure how those came to be so associated with a particular party, but the history of the Democratic Party in Texas has plenty of fiscal conservatives in it. But there are Republicans who crossed over that election cycle who didn't later. And I think with the mistakes that Donald Trump is making, with the spinelessness, the fecklessness of the Republican Party over the past 6 months in particular, 9 months in particular, I think we're going to see surge in Democratic turnout, independents break to the left, and crossover from Republicans. Texas is a tough state to win. Will that be enough? I think if you add those three up, you see some statewide wins.
No, I mean, that answers partly a question I had, which was 2018 was a Trump midterm. You won in that year at flipping a seat, and now we're again in a Trump midterm talking about that anger. But do you see anything else, either positive or negative, about those two differentials between 2018 and 2024? At least from my perspective, I see a lot of people who were activists who had never been active before in 2018 suddenly creating groups that are now talking to me about fatigue. And they don't have hope anymore because they think they've done so much for the past 6 years and it didn't change anything. So do you see that, or are you seeing those similarities again?
Kate, I think that's a really not just good, but unfortunately important observation that in 2018, that surge of hope was not on the heels of a couple of cycles of crestfallen activists, right? We came out of 2018 really enthusiastic and the results were great. It was the best legislative cycle that we've had probably in 30 years because the Republicans were chased into the productive zone, right? And worked with Democrats to pass good policy, some. And in subsequent cycles, Democrats have thought, aha, we've got this momentum, let's keep going. And we've just been crushed, and not crushed in election results, but certainly beaten and emotionally crushed, right? People had so much invested in this. And now we say, oh, but we can do it again. And it's hard for people to lay it all on the line, whether you're talking about making donations, using your free time, or just the emotional energy to invest in the hope of Democrats winning in a place where they weren't winning before. It is harder in that respect. But I think that difficulty is countered by the severity of the crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think your hope factor point is right on point, and we have to figure out, at least in the short term for this election cycle, how to buck ourselves up. I think what's really interesting, and people don't really remember about how close Beto got to beating Ted Cruz, is that at the time that was a record-setting fundraising haul. It was the most anybody had ever raised for a race like that. I think it was like $80 million. A lot of people don't realize 40 of that came within like the last several weeks of the campaign. like a full half of it. I think Texas Democrats in particular, more so than other Democrats throughout the country, have this real pessimism problem, which is a shame because Texans who love Friday Night Lights, we understand the importance of clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose, that kind of optimism, can do attitude. But somehow we convince ourselves we've lost the race before it's ever started, before somebody says go.
Yeah, and coming in and being persuaded that we can win in the last 5 minutes, there's only so much you can spend money on at the very end of the campaign. It needs to be invested over time.
Yeah. How useful is that Beyonce endorsement in the last few days of the election? Would have been a lot better at the start of early voting, right?
Or 6 months earlier, so that you have time to weave it into a campaign and it doesn't just look like a pop stunt. Oh, look, Beyonce's for me. I mean, weave it in over time.
Yeah. And I think it's part of the bigger picture of, this is the rant you'll probably hear on every episode, is that Texas Democrats, we have lost statewide more consistently than any state party in the country. And there's no good reason for that. Did you realize this? Every red state, every single one of them, like Alabama, West Virginia, you name it. Kentucky has a Democratic governor right now. States far more red on the presidential level have elected Democrats statewide more recently than we have. And it's not just that. Every blue state, the bluest of the blues, the Californias, the Massachusetts, the Vermonts, the Hawaiis, they've all elected Republicans statewide more recently than we've elected a Democrat.
But we're going to change that.
But that's my point. My point is there's no good reason for it. So the fact that we continue to tell ourselves the story that Texas is forever red, that's a story that has no real basis.
Well, it certainly is self-fulfilling conclusion, right? It's self-fulfilling prophecy, but also conclusion. You asked at the beginning, what led to your decision to run for Attorney General. One of the things is that I think we can win this cycle. I really do. I value my work as a senator, and if I don't have the good fortune to win the Attorney General's race, and I plan to, but if I don't, I'll be back in as a senator, and that work is important enough to not just be chasing a statewide office for the sake of being the Attorney General. I'm chasing it because it's possible, and I want to do what the Attorney General can do to improve our state.
Well, can we go into that? Because one of the things that we are exploring is flipping Texas, right? And one of the things that we, Alex and Kate, can't control are the voter laws. But you, as a senator, get to vote on voter laws. And hopefully, as an attorney general, you do as well. And so, but we cannot, we hypothesize that our voter laws is one of the factors of many that creates the voter apathy and the low voter turnout that we have in this state.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious, do you think that is a big factor of many? And how, as an attorney general, can you potentially address that? Because it does seem like a chicken and the egg thing. Like, we want to change the voter laws, but we got to elect Democrats to do it in order to get more turnout. So what do we got to do?
I think the first thing we have to do is get over the pessimism of thinking that, the elections are so rigged we can't possibly win. Yes, we can. You can win, or you can win these elections despite the fact that Texas has the most onerous voting requirements in the country. I don't like what Texas has done with these. Unfortunately, legislatures very often come down to simple arithmetic. Are there more people who vote for it than there are who vote against it, right? So, when the Republican majority is not only passing highly burdensome restrictive voting laws, only 90% of which are bad, right? 10% of them are just, we have to run elections efficiently and well and make them trustworthy. Great. But if they're all going to vote for it and all the Democrats are going to vote against it, we're going to lose. And we do. Until we get a majority of Democrats in the legislature, they're going to do this stuff. And we make speeches about it, and we hold rallies, and we will continue to make speeches and hold rallies, and we'll use data from other states. But we cannot outnumber them until we outnumber them. Do I think it's had an effect? I do think it's had a depressive effect. I'll say it 50 times, we can overcome this. I don't want anybody staying home because they think, game over, they've made voting too hard. No, they're going to chisel away at the numbers that we could probably hit, but it ain't game over. I particularly want to talk about two things with voter suppression, discouragement, and one of them is mailing balloting. And this is pretty sinister because when they first decided to make mail-in balloting trickier, to trip people up, to invalidate ballots in particular, if you look at the history of mail-in ballots, historically it had favored Republicans. And I thought, this was a few sessions ago, I'm like, what are they doing? They're cutting off their own advantage here. But what they knew when they posed that stuff, if you look at the lines, the trajectory of Democratic mail-in votes and Republican mail-in votes, the Republican line was going down and the Democratic line was going up. They were anticipating that line crossing and shutting it down before it could happen. Diabolically brilliant. And the effect has been they have caused Republicans and Democrats to have their votes not counted. And it has been so discouraging that some people are like, you know what, screw it, I'm just not going to vote. That's bad. And then you see things like reducing polling places on college campuses. There's a number of ways. The ID requirements are highly controversial. It's difficult to argue broadly to the public that you shouldn't have strict ID requirements. When you look at these, those are problematic too. But I don't think as Democrats we do ourselves any favor by overemphasizing the importance of these restrictive voting laws. They're there. We've got to beat them anyway. And what I think is far more pernicious, far more destructive to rigging elections is gerrymandering, not least of which is this mid-decennial redistricting. That disenfranchises millions of people deliberately, skillfully, scientifically, by essentially rendering elections unwinnable, and that suppresses turnout.
Because they don't think that they can make a difference in that local race.
And they're being quite rational if they're talking about only a local race. And so we've got to get people to understand that you're not just voting in your local race, you're voting for the statewide offices, but also your local race matters. If the margin is 55-45, that's one thing. If it's 75-25, that's quite another. And you voting in a race where you think that your candidate can't win because it's gerrymandered does matter to this overall progress. And I know that, Kate and Alex, you are interested in kind of a long game that I think Republicans have been playing and Democrats have not. And if we're looking at the long game, I want Democrats to understand that your vote matters even if you are effectively gerrymandered into being unable to elect the candidate of your choice.
It's the beauty of a statewide race. You can't redraw what Texas looks like, right?
I want a bumper sticker that says you can't gerrymander a statewide race. Somehow put it everywhere, because someone like you want to vote everywhere, right? Like,
I have to get votes everywhere.
Yeah, you want a blue dot in a red area, your vote matters in your race. And
a Dallas vote is the same as a vote from the 903 where I'm from in Sherman, Texas, right?
That's right. That's right.
A Sherman vote counts just as much.
And I wanted people to see that it's important for statewide candidates like me and others, but it's also very important to your local candidate. It's hard to recruit people to run for office in a serious way if they're just going to get their clock cleaned and they feel like there's no one supporting them. And so there are people who will run knowing that it's a long shot, but they got to feel some level of support. I do think it's important.
Yeah, that's right. And we have to do it. We talked about this with one of our other guests, Christian Carranza. She's running in probably the most flippable House seat this cycle in San Antonio. She and I had worked together on the 2014 governor's race as campus organizers, if you can believe it.
Awesome.
And the point I made was, I'm not sure, and I haven't checked, but my sense is that I don't think we're even running enough candidates to take a majority in the legislature should we all win.
That's an interesting observation.
And that's if that's true, and to be fair, I have not fully vetted that. That's my sense, though. If that's true, that says something really sad about the state of our party. Like, we're not even trying to win in the big sense. Obviously, we have people who are running who are trying to win. I 100% understand that you're trying to win your race, and I think you've got a good plan to do it. I mean, you flipped a seat already.
I think it's winnable.
But my point is, we can't take back the legislature unless we have a majority of the legislature. And we can't have a majority of the legislature if we don't have enough people running.
Yeah.
And there's two parts to that. We have to get people to run. They have to believe that they have a meaningful chance. Most of the time, there are people who will run in an 80-20 district just to keep the voice alive. And I'm so thankful to them.
God bless them.
Even there, they have to feel the support at home. Can you get me to 25% instead of 20? That would feel good, right? I'll feel like
forward progress,
meaningful,
right? Yeah.
Right. So I do want everybody to keep voting, even if you feel like your vote doesn't matter in a local election. It does matter in the local election, and of course, it matters at the statewide level.
Have you seen a difference, though? I'm always interested in process and infrastructure, and Alex is all about the messaging, which is a theme in our podcast. But have you seen any measurable differences since then as far as what we have as our resources and assets as Democrats here in the state of Texas and being able to run and prop up races?
On a statewide basis, I'm not a great person to ask. I'm not super knowledgeable about it. I have had enough interactions with statewide candidates and statewide operatives to know that in the past 6 years, there has been a lot of work done and a lot of hard examination to what's the best way to deploy resources, how best can people cooperate throughout the state geographically and up and down the ballot. I don't know. I could not assess the health of where we are today. I can definitely tell you that a lot of good minds have been on the subject.
Yeah,
and I know people who are out there trying to build parallel infrastructure, and some of that parallel infrastructure is starting to connect to the internal infrastructure. There's more coordination among outside groups and candidates, more coordination between the party and outside groups. So yes, I guess I have seen encouraging trends. I'm just not knowledgeable enough to give a worthwhile opinion.
I imagine you're asking, like I did, people that ran before you in a statewide race, like what worked, what it didn't work, and what are the resources. And one of the perceptions I just saw as a person on the doors was that it seemed like the top of the tickets in the statewide races were really the ones driving a lot of the grassroots organizing. And so I'm really curious about what resources you anticipate as a statewide office, holder, to hopeful holder to get elected in a general, and like what that coordination looks like.
I think I don't know if it's a mistake Democrats has been made, but it's certainly been the case that in the past 4 or 5, most cycles for a while, Democrats have generally had star power at the top, and 99% of the resources have gone to one person for one office. And I think it's an awfully lot to expect of one individual to single-handedly flip a state, even if she or he has all of the resources. And to win in Texas as Democrats, and I would like more than just a one-off. I would like a shift in mindset. I want to see Democrats win across the board and continuously. We are going to have to get more people to vote for Democrats. And since no one person appeals to everybody, it's beneficial for us to have a variety of political personalities and personas and backgrounds, professional and personal, so that we have broader appeal, which means that we're going to have to invest in more than one race. As an attorney general candidate, which is going to get absolutely a fraction of the attention in the media and the financing that's going to go to perhaps a governor's race or certainly the U.S. Senate race, I think that if we do fund races like attorney general and other statewides of great significance, like comptroller, we will have a broader coalition and a deeper well to draw from when we're trying to appeal to voters. And I think that makes for a stronger ticket overall.
Yeah, I think the word invest is the right way to think about it. I mean, even the casual Robinhood investors like me understand the concept of buy the dip, right? That's what I've been telling to anybody who will listen, is that this is the cycle to buy the dip. If you wanted to run for office as a Texas Democrat, now's the time to do it, because
I agree with that.
All of the right environmental factors are in play. In the same way 2018 was a great opportunity, I think 2026 is going to be that on steroids, because all of the things that kept Trump reined in, both in his cabinet and in Congress, are gone. I think it still shocks me whenever I do the math on how long his term has actually been. It feels a lot longer than that. Pardon the clunky transition here, but I wanted to bring up to the listeners here, because I think we try to interject some pop culture when we can. People might not know, and Kate was not even aware of the show, but you were the
You're calling me out?
I'm going to call you out. It's fine. Not everybody has to have seen Dragon Ball Z, but Senator Johnson, you composed the music for the American version of Dragon Ball Z. Is that right?
I did 67 of 300 some episodes. So I did a chunk of the shows and 4 or 5 short form Dragon Ball Z movies.
Wow.
Yeah. So after school every day, Toonami on Cartoon Network. I had my Rice Krispie treat. I had my Dr. Pepper. And that was part of my adolescence, man. You were part of that. And so I think it's really kind of incredible just how widespread, not Kate, but a lot of people have seen Dragon Ball Z. And when I tell people that about you, it's always one of the most fascinating things to them. They're like, a senator? Dragon Ball Z? And so I was wondering, maybe, I don't know how much of the shows you actually watched, if you're just making the music or what, but
at least 67 episodes.
You watched them?
Well, I had to score them.
You watched them.
Frame by frame.
My question is, if you'll forgive the awkwardness, is how do we go Super Saiyan? What's going to be that last straw that cracks Goku, where he just unlocks something within him? Like, I think it was killing Krillin, right? Frieza kills Krillin, and he loses it, and you see the hair go from black to gold, and what a moment that is for a young person to see for the first time. I think there's something that's going to happen in Texas where we just kind of snap, and the hair is going to go black to gold, because that's kind of how it happened on the other side, right? It wasn't that there was just a one-off. It started that way, but then it became the entire state was Republican.
Yeah.
It happened very quickly. And I think that's going to happen the same way for Democrats. Once we can get over this story we've told ourselves for years that like it can't happen, when we have a proof point that it can, I think everything's different.
I don't think you're going to have a gold hair of a candidate that's going to carry us over. I think if you're going to use the metaphor, and there's something to this, like finding something within yourself all of a sudden that you didn't know was there, and that power just fills you. I think that's going to have to be as a party and as voters collectively. And what is that moment? I think it's where we stop playing defense. Or we don't stop playing defense. We stop only playing defense. And the Republicans have been really good at just firing stuff at us, reacting all the time to these things. But I think in order to really flip things, people are going to have to know that if you want competence and you want compassion and you want vision and you want intelligence and you want responsibility, you want fiscal prudence, that's the Democratic Party. And when people can say in response to Aaron Wright or Chip Roy saying, I'm going to fight the radical left, when you can say to them, who on the radical left closed your hospital? Who on the radical left took resources away from your public schools? Who let you run out of water? It wasn't the radical left. Why aren't there any grocery stores in your town? Is it because federal antitrust law has been neglected for 45 years and we just watched more and more money flow into fewer and fewer and fewer hands, and those in turn are able to control the levers of government? Is that what you all want? Or do you want a government that actually creates markets that are competitive and you have lower prices and better services? Do you want one that's not spending all its time trying to bully people on cultural issues in order to distract you from why all of your local businesses have shut down? When people see us as the party that understands what has happened and how to fix it, hair goes gold.
Yes. Gold is good, I think. That's an analogy.
We'll get you caught up.
Yeah. My husband's a big gamer and loves anime, so I'm sure I'll get there.
You know what I've neglected to say on this? When we talked about the Attorney General's race and you're talking about Trump, and we know that the election can't be all about Trump, but boy, he sure is giving a lot for people to talk about. State attorneys general are going to be the last line of defense to Trump's wrecking crew that is tearing apart. This is not overstated. We have crumbling constitutional foundations. The walls that separated the branches of government that were part of the original conception of this nation and duplicated by every state, including Texas, are being torn down. And that's really bad news. And it's attorneys general who can, to some degree, block, slow, and change that. So the office itself is exceedingly important right now.
Well, and we saw that with Ken Paxton, right? Like he used the office a lot of times to sue the federal government with whatever Obama did, right? So he's suing to override the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. So you're right. And I agree with you. It's a very important office, and making the case that people should pay particular attention to this race, I think, amongst all the ones, is a great place to start when we're talking about countering what Donald Trump is doing.
Think about it in terms of schools and money. Texas was allocated $700 million for a certain element of public education. And Donald Trump said, no, actually, we're not going to send that out there. He doesn't have authority to do that. That's been appropriated by Congress. What a good attorney general would do is sue the Trump administration, like a lot of attorneys general around this country already have. Now, what a bad attorney general would do is collude with the federal government when they try to harm Texas. For example, when 24 years ago, Republican Governor Rick Perry signed into law in-state tuition for undocumented kids who've grown up in Texas, gone to school in Texas, gotten good grades in Texas, and want to go to college in Texas, but they're low income or they're very poor, and we want to give them in-state tuition so they can be a bigger, better contributor to our society. Republicans decided that was a good idea. Democrats together, and for 24 years, 12 successive legislatures held that up under attack every time. We've said this is Texas policy. It's good for Texas. It's good for people. It's moral. It's economic. It's great. Nope, Trump administration sues Texas to invalidate it. And instead of defending the laws of the state of Texas, which is the responsibility of the attorney general within constitutional limits, he signs an agreed order with the judge. In 6 hours after the lawsuit was filed, 24 years of good policy, Republican Democratic policy, thrown out.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I want to ask you about a new lawsuit that's been filed. I think it's going in the exact opposite direction of what I think we're trying to do as a party, which is to grow, to expand, to bring in more people and build a coalition that's sustainable past this 2030 reapportionment, right? And that is the Republican Party, for some reason, wants to contract and be exclusive. And they want to close their primaries and not allow anyone who is not a card-carrying registered Republican, which has never been the case in Texas elections. So they've filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of State, Jane Nelson. My understanding is that that's the kind of thing the Attorney General's office should be getting involved in to defend the current law.
Generally speaking, that is the job of the Attorney General, whether they like the current law or not. It's not a legislative position, unless constitutionality or other errors in process would require the Attorney General to take a different position. But yes, I do believe the Attorney General should be intervening in that lawsuit. It's not the easiest case as a legal matter to throw down on. As I looked at the law in this case, and I believe that the position of the Republican Party on this one is just unsupportable in the law. But, we've had a lot of judges on courts right now that aren't that interested in upholding precedent. the precedent that the Republican Party cites in that would seem to favor them, but it's actually flowing in the reverse. Those cases held that you couldn't require, I think it was that you couldn't require a party to hold closed primaries. They didn't hold that you were required to have closed primaries. So
they cite to a California, it's a U.S. Supreme Court case about the old California system. And the old California system was upset that people were forced into voting in a primary. And that was an offense, an affront to associational rights. California has changed their laws. Now it's the top 2 vote getters go on from the primary and into the general. And so that has been upheld as constitutional. Again, yeah, I mean, we don't have to get into the merits legally, but I'm just curious about the broader context of a political party who feels so confident that they want to exclude people. Just for context, I learned about this case because of my involvement with an organization called Veterans for All Voters. Texas has the largest population of veterans in the country. Kate and I are both service members, or were service members. We're both former federal clerks, so I'm going to be careful about the way I talk about federal judges. But I will say I don't think it's an accident that they filed this case in Amarillo, where they were pretty sure which judge they were going to get. I'll just leave it at that.
Which is one judge that covers that docket, and they might be a Trump appointee. So, yeah.
It rhymes with mesmeric.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I would say I think he is not a good judge.
Yeah. Well,
there are people around the country that don't know whether that is good or bad for Democrats, frankly. But when you look at the reason that they did that, it's not well motivated. And I think it's pretty clear the reason is they felt like the effort to throw out the very, 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 very conservative Republican Dade Phelan, because he wasn't very, 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 very crazy conservative, was foiled, they say, by Democrats voting in the Republican primary. And you know what? That might well have happened. But guess what? Because the Republican primary determines the outcome in that district, it's perfectly rational for Democrats to participate in that, and within their rights, and more representative of the people of that region. So the effort to close the primaries is actually an effort to ensure that fewer people have a voice in the outcome of elections. In that respect, it's anti-democratic.
It's incredibly anti-democratic, especially when you consider my earlier rant about being the losingest most statewide party. Because when you consider that in the last 2 presidential cycles, the entire voting age population turnout for the Republican primary was less than 10%, right? And in a midterm where, you know, we got governor and lieutenant governor, attorney general race like yours, it's like under 5%. So consider an actually competitive primary, like a Dade Phelan who wins like 51% to 49% in his district. You cut those numbers in half. In a presidential year, we're saying 5% of Republican primary voters get to decide everything. And in midterms, 2.5% of Republican primary voters get to decide everything.
And that's, in fact, generally how it goes, notwithstanding the possibility that some Democrat drops into the election. It's really only in a runoff that I think that could be a serious variable. Most people who identify with one party or another are going to vote in the primary of the party they identify with at the time.
The other bumper sticker I want is get to the primary, because I want to convince people to actually vote in primaries. How would you convince people to do that? I mean, and you have a other person in the primary in your race, but I mean, it just seems like if we can actually vote in a primary, we might not have the extremes that we're looking at. And I remember in my race, I was so surprised that my vote universe that I was thinking about targeting was only 12,000 people of over 100,000 person district, and it just seemed insane.
It is. There are a couple of reasons to really drive people to the primary. One is that people who vote in primaries vote in generals. It's the whole concept of making voting a habit. If there's an election, you vote. And it's like, it's just a primary. Well, then you're not in the habit of voting. So let's get in the habit of voting, because early primary voting will increased turnout in general election voting. So it's important for that reason. It's important to participate and pick the best candidate. But as you and Alex have both just been describing, if we're talking about 3% of voters or 5 or 6% of voters determining in the primary who ultimately will be the nominee, your vote counts a lot. And I know actually when I ran in 2018, I did an analysis and trying to figure out whether or not I could flip a 30-year seat. I analyzed the district in terms of who votes Republican, who votes Democrat, and how it was that I was running against a Tea Partier who was really off the edge of the table politically when he ran and while he was in office. How did he beat a 20-year veteran, highly respected, generally very well regarded Republican John Corona? How on earth did Don Huffines beat him? And the answer was because it was a primary election and a very small number of people turned out. And the ones who turned out were the most angriest, fire-breathingest, far-right people. That's who turns out in the primary. If you want to take the power of deciding who represents you away from the extreme elements, then those of you who kind of have a busy day and you're fairly, level-headed in your politics, you got to vote.
Yeah, and because like something like 50% of veterans identify as independent, those are the kinds of people we want to have a moderating, civic-minded, bigger picture influence on these primaries. And the Republican Party is saying no thanks.
Then saying no thanks. And let me be clear, I actually think it's very important to have people at the extremes of the ideological spectrum involved in the process. Sometimes they're right, or they can teach us something, or they can cause us to think. And sometimes something that might have seemed to be an extreme left view or an extreme right view 5-6 years later, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I don't mean to suggest that people who are on the ideological edges don't have a right to have their voice be influential. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And certainly, I mean, moderate and centrist and whatever middle of the road means in certain contexts is kind of without substance. I mean, what's the middle ground on civil rights, for example?
Yeah. Is gay marriage a leftist position?
Right.
No, it's just like normal. It's normal. Yeah. It's what any decent person approves of, right? That's not a lefty position. But when we're talking about the polls, the problem is, we all know this, we decry social media and the news and Donald Trump's fake news machine, the misinformation machine out there. It is making the polls less thoughtful.
Well, I think first, can you give us a couple things that people can do at home? Because that's the thing that I've heard a lot are people wanting a plan. Like, okay, 2018 and now, what has worked, and maybe we're feeling less hopeful, but like specific things that folks can do to help drive our statewide races in Texas.
I think go outside. Find something to do. Find a group to drive to, people to talk to, be engaged in conversations. Yes, read the news. But I think we've got to get past the feeling engaged simply by reading and being upset. Mm-hmm. Find a group to join, or go listen to a podcast, for example, right? Go listen to a podcast instead of doom scrolling, right? Yeah. The social media experience is designed to capture you for 3 seconds at a time, and you're really shutting down a lot of the mental process. And if you take a breath and you go outside and you talk to friends, or you listen to a longer form podcast and then take a walk and think about it, you reach different conclusions and you have an idea. You know what? I'm going to go talk to Jerry. I remember he was so hung up on this and that and that. I have something for him. In fact, I'm going to take him to vote in the primary.
Yeah.
Right? And so just getting away from the doom scrolling, I think, is helpful. And it's hard because there's so much doom coming at us and it's so damn interesting. Yeah. But get your friends to vote. Get your friends engaged. Talk about football for a little while, but then talk about the importance of voting in the primary. Yeah. The main thing we can do is get people to vote in the primary. I think that's about the most important thing.
Yeah. I'm going to make that bumper sticker, I swear, or the pin. But okay, our final questions. If people want to support you or follow you, where should they find you, Senator? And also, what do you got going on outside of politics? Because we got, as you're saying, we're getting outside. We have to have something else going on in our lives.
NathanforTexas.com is my website, and you can read more about what we're doing. We'll be updating that website over time. Of course, you can be following social media at Nathan for Texas on all the various platforms. There's ways to contribute. You can chime in. The campaign's easy to find. Emails, nj@nathanfortexas.com. Of course, we'll be running up a ground game as we get moving into next year. A lot of ways to contribute. If we have events in your area, please come. It's great to see people. Outside of this political world, I still try to be a lawyer. I still try to run. I'm not gonna catch Alex, but I run a couple days a week, and I swim, and I still try to play the piano a little bit and keep in touch with my really great grown-up kids.
Amazing. I love it. I'm also a musician, and I would love to be a better runner, but maybe we can all get together and do both. But I will speak on behalf of both of us and say thank you so much for joining us, Senator, and we learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you both for launching this podcast and kind of bringing something to the conversation that I think people have been missing for a long time, which is this kind of long-form, long-term, broad thinking. How are we going to win this? Because we can.
Right. We can.
Thanks, Senator. And good luck.
Thank you.
You can follow us on all socials at Mission Texas Podcast. Email us at missiontexaspodcast@gmail.com. This episode is edited by Juan Jose Flores. Our music bumper is by Adam Pickerel, and our cover art is by Tina Sohn.